Welcome back to What's New with Mead. We're in episode number 71, and I have the man himself, Ken Schramm, on to chat all about brewing and mead and everything in his world. Ken, welcome to the podcast.
Garrett, it's my pleasure.
I have really been looking forward to sitting down with you and chatting because, as many people might know and know this about you, you are kind of, I've called you the father or godfather of mead making because of your prevalence with the Complete Mead Maker and all that. So it's been kind of, I don't want to say you've been a ethereal figure in my life for a long time, but you kind of have been. So it's kind of fun to sit down and see you in person.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to ask a question first. And many people have heard your story, I'm sure, through various podcasts. So I don't necessarily want to rehash all of that. I don't want to just repeat a podcast you've done in the past. But I am curious, how long have you been brewing?
My older brother, Mike, bought me a home brewing kit for Christmas in 1987. And I actually really didn't have a lot of faith in my ability to make a decent beer until I went camping with my older brother, Mike, and my former brother-in-law, Andy Henry, still a great friend of mine, who, and in fact, Andy has done artwork for us for our labels. He's a wonderful man.
That's cool.
Wonderful artist. And Andy brought his first porter that he made from his homebrew kit. Mike bought kits for my younger brother, me, and my brother-in-law. And Andy brought his, and it was phenomenal. It was just incredible. He brought 12, and they were like gone in on the blink of an eye. And at that point, I recognized that, okay, yeah, I mean, Andy can do this, I can do this. And so I went home and just completely immersed myself in the hobby. I joined the American Homebrewers Association. I subscribed to Zymurgy. I joined a homebrew club after, well, one of the really important things was I got my first copy of Zymurgy. And in that copy of Zymurgy was a listing of the first 5 people to make national status as BJCP judges.
Oh, okay, yeah.
A while back, right? And then nobody had gotten past, certified, and so Bill Pfeiffer was one of the first nationals, and he lived in Wyandotte, which shocked me because I was living like a few miles away in Taylor, and so I just being the kind of guy that I am, I looked him up in the phone book back in the days of the phone book, and sure enough, there's this number, and I called him up and said, "Hey, I see you're a national beer judge. Can you taste some of my stuff?" And he said, "Yeah, bring it over and let's get started."
Cool.
So I did. We became really good friends. We brewed many batches together, and he was the 1985 mead maker of the year for the American Homebrewers Association. So he taught me a lot about. He critiqued all of my early batches.
Yeah.
And when I brought him my first mead, he said, "You got a lot of work to do here, son." It was sort of tasty, but it was what I have come to refer to as an elementary school play mead. And an elementary school play is when it's your kid in the elementary school play, it's really, really good. And when it's not your kid in the elementary school play, it's just an elementary school play. It's fun, it's wonderful, but it's not Broadway.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to do Broadway, well, you got to step your game up. So, Bill really, really helped me a lot. He was a wonderful guy. He passed away in 2000, but he was a huge influence on me and introduced me to incredible people, introduced me to Byron Birch, and introduced me to Charlie Papazian, who wrote The Complete Joy of Homebrewing. Bill was also at the time, Bill was on the American Homebrewers Association governing committee. At the time it was called the Board of Advisors, and he knew everyone. He was also part of the Home Wine and Beer Trade Association.
Okay, yeah.
He was just deeply connected. I would go to a conference with him, and he just knew everybody. And he introduced me to everybody, and that really helped a lot too. He was just a really generous, really kind, and giving person.
So in your beginning was all beer, or did you immediately jump into to wine or mead, or was it?
Oh no. I mean, I had I don't know somewhere around here is the Complete Joy of Home Brewing,
Yeah.
and I immediately, I mean, I'm a reader. I read that book cover to cover. I read my first copy of Zymergy cover to cover, which was how I found out about Bill. And in the back of the Complete Joy of Home Brewing is the appendix on mead. I think it's appendix in that edition was appendix number 4. And it really, Papazian does a great job in that book of making everything seem like, well, I sure want to make that and drink it.
Yeah.
And I did. And the thing that really appealed to me about mead when I got into it, I loved making beers. I loved trying to target an exact flavor profile that I knew already, because I had become interested in beer in the 1970s. My dad taught me what a good beer was by telling me what beers he loved when he went over to Germany in the 1950s. And when I tried them, I thought, well, this is way better than the beer I've been drinking. Yeah. and so I started, and that basically began an entire sort of pilgrimage into beer. I tried to learn, I learned what Pilsner was and what Dortmunders and Kolsch's and German wheat beers. And by the time I had made it through the 70s, I was drinking Newcastle Brown Ale and Pilsner Urquell and Dortmunder Union, and then there was this great, really really cool guy, Ted Badgerow, who opened the Chelsea Brewing Company in Chelsea, Michigan, which was a brewery in Michigan even before Bell's, which is pretty crazy. And his beer showed up in the local party stores in the college town I was in, and I bought it and fell in love with that too. So I was drinking porters and stouts, just basically everything I could get my hands on to learn about beers. Now, after I graduated, a really good friend of mine, Dave Pope, who designed the insignia for Schramm's Mead, and the Schramm's which is also on our foil capsules.
Yeah.
Dave moved to Chicago and had a job there working with Leo Burnett, an ad agency, and I went and visited him a few times. We're still really good friends. We're both heartbroken about the Lions, but Dave introduced me to some really great beer stores in Chicago that had way more beer than many more styles of beer than you could get in the city of Detroit. Even though Detroit is a fairly big city, Chicago's an even bigger city, and so sort of like the game was on. There was this place called the Wine Keller that had this list of hundreds of beers, and the game was to try and taste them all.
Yeah.
As many as we could. And they would release the list they had, and it was like 4 columns, single spaced on a sheet of legal paper, and we'd just keep
going for them
off, and then they'd release a new one the next one, and there'd be 3 new ones on there. So I kept going back and forth to Chicago and buying these great beers and learning about it. And that was fascinating for me in the 70s. And then like I said, I was thoroughly convinced that there was great beer. I just wasn't thoroughly convinced that I could make it myself when my brother gave me the kid. And then I tried it, and lo and behold, it was. I mean, I don't know. It's the same thing I've said about mead. I've said about lots of other things. Everybody can make a better whatever at home than you can pretty much buy from the store. Can you make a better loaf of bread? Yep. Can you make a better chocolate chip cookie? Yes. Well, why wouldn't you think you could make a better beer?
Right.
I don't know why. I was just, it's just too chicken to give it a shot until I tasted my brother-in-law's, and sure enough, then off you go.
Well, one thing that I find fun about you, especially, you have this long history, and you recently, it's probably been about a year now, you started a YouTube kind of series where you're doing one beer, one wine, and one mead.
One mead, and one beer. Yeah.
So tell us about that. What was the inspiration behind doing that?
Well, really, the effort behind that was to try and show people that mead is just as good as great beer and great wine. There are wines out there that cost thousands of dollars a bottle. There are beers out there that people clamor for.
Uh-huh.
But a really well-made mead is just as delicious as either of those things.
Yeah.
And my point in trying to set that up was, and I haven't had the time really. We've been scrambling pretty hard getting the orchard underway and doing a lot of other work. And I haven't done one in a while. The guy I was working on those with will be happy to know that you want to hear another one.
Yeah.
But I just wanted people to understand that mead is great mead is just as good as great wine and great beer.
Yeah. Well, and I enjoyed the series because it's fun. I mean, it's exposure to like different beers for me. I really like beer myself. I wish I was more. We've got a lot of craft beer around Oklahoma City, and everywhere you can get craft beer anywhere at this point. But it's just fun to see you kind of walk through what you like as well, because everybody's so different and so many different exposures, being exposed to different opportunities and things. It's made me go like, ooh, I want to get that beer, or I want to get that mead. I want to try and figure out how I can get access to that.
Yeah.
So
the internet has really done a lot to help, and especially if you are in a state that you can get things shipped into. Unfortunately, Michigan is not one of those states. Michigan is got a prohibition on the shipping of alcohol, and prior to somebody making a big fuss about it, I did order stuff from other states and got things shipped to me, but now no one will ship to Michigan any longer.
That's a bummer.
So yeah, it is. It is. I'm back to driving to Chicago to try and get good things, and I'm sure you understand that too. I mean, even some of the really good things that you can get a hold of are hard to get, and then they're hard to get shipped to you in pristine condition.
Yeah,
and that's really important, especially when it comes to things like really light beers, or for that matter, just any kind of beer that's mistreated. You can turn it into stew. Same thing with great wines. If you ship them in the wrong conditions, you can turn them into prune juice.
Yeah.
So it's really. I mean, the other thing I was, if I can.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hold up. Yeah, the other thing I was really hoping to help people understand is the concept of QPR, quality price ratio. And I think I kind of covered it pretty well in the first episode. But if you haven't watched it, you can go on YouTube and search for one wine, one mead, and one beer. But essentially, what QPR is the notion that things may be expensive, but they can still be a good deal. I mean, the best golf clubs, the best fly fishing rods, the best stereo equipment, right, is going to be expensive. All of those things occur across a spectrum, and they all have a performance spectrum, a cost spectrum and a performance spectrum. And if you can get something that's at the high end of the performance spectrum, but at the middle or even the lower end of the price spectrum, then you've got a good quality to price ratio.
Right.
And,
yes.
And that's everybody understands the concept of finding a Macintosh receiver at a garage sale for $40. If you find that, you should buy it.
Right.
And the same thing is true for lots of things. Well, it gets a lot finer than that. When you get to great beers and great meads, Scotch, whiskey, bourbon, whatever. You get into shades rather than a Macintosh receiver for $40. But knowing what's going to deliver really, really high pleasure when you drink it for less than what someone else is charging for that same amount of pleasure.
Yeah.
It's a satisfying thing. I mean, everybody loves to get a good bargain. I love a good bargain. So that's what part of the show was about, and hopefully we'll get back to it soon.
Well, it's fun. It's a really fun series, and I'll, of course, as if anyone's interested, I'll try to put a link below so they can find that online. But I've enjoyed getting to watch those, and I look forward to more of them if you get a chance to. I know you're super busy. I got to talk to Allison and James and just about a week ago, and they were telling me all about the orchard, and you guys sound very busy right now with all of that as it stands.
Yeah, we are. There's a lot to do. The next thing up right now, it's the end of January. It's time to order scion wood if we're going to try and add some more varieties to the apple trees.
Okay.
Essentially to some of the other trees as well. I tried to add some peaches last year and didn't have any luck with those grafts, but I've had a lot of luck. In the spring we'll have planting to do. We have repairs to fencing to do to be able to keep the deer out, which is really important.
She was telling me all about that. She's saying you're like the nemesis right now.
They are our arch enemies. No question. And they're just innocent little deer. They're just trying to find something to eat. But please find it somewhere else.
Yeah, please. So, have you always had a green thumb, or is this something that over time you feel like you've just dove so deep into it, you just got there?
Well, I have to say. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about Ken-Tram, a few more things, but hopefully we can talk about meat after that.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to.
But when I was a kid, my parents, as kind of a lesson to all of us kids, a lesson in responsibility, they gave each of the kids in our family a fruit tree to keep track of.
Okay.
And we had to fertilize it and water it and prune it and spray it if we wanted to get any fruit off of it.
Yeah.
Well, my tree was a peach tree, and I don't know if I love peaches because I had a peach tree or I just ended up. I mean, I love stone fruits. I just love peaches and plums and cherries, and they're a love of mine. But once, I mean, I know that the incredible satisfaction of having raised some fruit myself and picked it off the tree when it was perfectly ripe, and then eating it.
Yeah.
And those were Alberta peaches. Was my first tree. It was an Alberta peach. My gosh. I mean, it's just so much better than the fruit that you can get in the store. There it is. It's completely ripe and completely delicious. And I was hooked. I was really hooked on it.
That's cool.
Eric had a Red Delicious apple tree, and I didn't love those. My brother had a Jonathan apple tree, and I loved those. Those were great. My sister had a pear; those were really good. All of those experiences helped to. I mean, I think they helped to ingrain a love of fruit in me, but they also helped me to understand that, and I think this was entirely my parents' point was. It's a long process, and you have to be diligent about it, and you have to stick with it for a while. And the reward happens not in a year or 2 years, but it happens in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And if you do it right for 4 or 5 years, the rewards get much, much bigger. So that was a great life lesson from my folks, and it also, like I said, it imbued in me a real serious love of fruit.
You learned patience at an early age, because if you were willing to work that hard and wait for that, that's a pretty cool. I don't have any kids right now, but I'm like, maybe I need to start growing. Maybe steal that.
I mean, I don't know. They say that there's also there may be some genetics to the whole marshmallow experiment thing. You know about that, I'm sure, right?
I actually don't.
Oh, they've done experiments with kids where they've said they put in front of the kids a marshmallow, and they've said to them, okay, here's the marshmallow. If you don't eat it, I'm going to come back in 20 minutes and give you another marshmallow.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Right? And some kids eat the marshmallow immediately, and some kids wait.
Right.
Kids that wait. The kids that wait. I mean, this is a really interesting thing to look up if you're into Googling, Googling up the marshmallow experiment. And then they've studied those kids, and then they followed them through their lives. And those kids that are able to, it's a delayed gratification test is what it's actually. That's what it's really called. But it's become kind of colloquially known as the marshmallow test.
Okay. Yeah.
And those kids that are able to, quote unquote, pass the marshmallow test tend to do really well in life. They tend to be able to delay gratification and to work on, they're better at working at things that have long payoffs.
Yeah.
And maybe that was, some people have said that that's genetic, and other people have said it can be learned. And I don't know which one it was, but at least,
You found it. You had it. One of the two.
I either had it or I learned it, but it got there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I love getting to learn about your orchard, especially with how many different fruits you guys are making. And it's fascinating to me. I told them while I was talking to them, I've started to do more with fruit. I've already done a lot of fruit meats, but I've never really done, I call them fruit bombs because I don't have any other terminology for them, just so much more fruit per gallon situation.
Right.
So as they're talking to me about the hundreds, thousands of pounds of fruit that goes into each container, I'm looking at my measly, I'm doing a no water blueberry right now. And I'd bought 16 pounds of blueberries, and I was like, this is a lot of blueberries. And I'm processing them and doing whatever. So whenever you are planning your recipes, how actively are you like picking fruit specifically from the vine and saying, well, I know these are the more acidic or less acidic? Like, are you getting very particular with a lot of your fruit that you're picking? Is it more in bulk at times?
I mean, I need to be clear. Right now, we're probably only buying on a revenue basis maybe 20%. We're probably only growing rather on a revenue basis only about 20% of the production of the meadery, and it's probably less than that because those are pretty expensive meats for us.
Yeah.
But what we do know is if you do it right, it's way better.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That control is you can make the case that being a control freak is at the core of quality for probably everybody. I mean, there's guys at Lamborghini whose whole job it is to say that's not good enough yet. And the same, Ferrari, Macintosh receivers, and,
yeah.
and lots and lots and lots of wineries around the world. And that, you have to respect that. That's how really cool things happen. People who have the diligence to stick with that kind of stuff. And your question was, how do we pick these fruits? Well, I mean, we do look at kind of a basic profile in fruits. There are, and I mean, I think probably the furthest, kind of to the side we go is apple, right? Apple is not a fruit that has a tremendously high level of acidity. It's not incredibly concentrated in its flavor. If you take a big bite of apple, even a really delicious apple, like some of the new varieties that are out there right now, Envy and Honeycrisp is pretty tasty. There's a bunch of them that are out there that are really good. And some of them are in fact bred specifically, Honeycrisp is bred for texture and flavor, but there are a couple of them that are out there right now that were strictly bred for flavor, right? Just to be like Pink Lady, right? Big, huge acidity and lots of concentrated flavor. But even those apples, they don't have the same concentration of flavor as putting an entire mouthful of raspberries or black currants in your mouth.
Yeah.
Right. When you do that, if you shove as much black currants in your mouth as you take as the size of a bite of apple, oh my gosh, your head explodes. Right? They're just incredibly concentrated in their flavor profile. And look for that. We like that. We like raspberries. We like tart cherries. The Charbet cherries. Again, 4 of those in your mouth is just an absolute. It's mind-bendingly delicious. And so that's what we're shooting for. We're shooting for mind-bendingly delicious, right?
Yeah.
And so now that's what the point of the orchard is to go out and grow fruits that we know about, that we know are really delicious. Some of them may be really problematic, like gooseberries have these huge thorns on them and are really difficult to pick. But on the other hand, they're spectacular.
Yeah.
Right? They are spectacular. And what we want to know is what's the difference between, and we're going to know this year, what's the difference between a Pixwell mead and a Hinomaki red mead, right?
Let me know when you find out.
Well, we're going to find out this year.
Yeah.
We are going to find out, and we're going to find out what a pink champagne current mead is like.
Interesting.
We're going to find out the difference between Crandall, a Consort, Menage Smiriu, blackcurrant meads.
Okay.
And those pieces of knowledge, we hope, are going to help the mead community for a long time.
Yeah.
I say everyone. Not everyone. Let's be ridiculous. No, let's not be ridiculous. Not everyone's going to care, right? But there are some people out there that are going to really care.
Yeah.
They're going to want to know. There are some consumers who if you're going to be buying mead again, for another 30 years of your life, it would be really nice if somebody would absolutely, totally perfect a red currant mead by figuring out what the difference between Red Lake and Jonquière Ventets is. And there are a couple other varieties that we're probably going to start growing eventually too. This is it's long game stuff.
Yeah.
Right? You got to grow the plants and then you got to make the stuff. And we're way behind the world of wine, and we're way behind the world of beer.
Mm-hmm.
We've known about Maris Otter for a long time. We've known about Harrington. We've certainly known about Cabernet Sauvignon and Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Riesling and all of those varieties. But the world of mead is playing catch up.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we're stupid. It doesn't mean we're not as dedicated and as capable as the rest of the world. It just means we have work to do.
Yeah.
Right. And I've never been shy about doing the work.
Yeah. Well, so that's an interesting thing. Obviously, I agree. We are very behind. Do you feel like a lot of our difficulties in catching up are coming from honey itself, in that it can be so different from year to year because of terroir and all the other things, in that situation? No. I don't think that is in and of itself is a problem. Okay. I do think that so far we haven't really worked with a lot of people in the beverage alcohol community. Right? There are sommeliers out there. There are whiskey people. There are chefs. There are all kinds of folks out there who would naturally be attracted to a thing like, okay, well, what's a really good mead and why? Yeah,
right? Those basic questions. They've been doing it with, trying to figure out great cheese. They've been doing it with trying to figure out how to make spectacular bread. And once you say, well, look, you can take honey and turn it into a fermented beverage and add these different fruits to it and whatnot, and it comes out great. Mm-hmm. What we know in the wine world, and I've said this a lot, and forgive me if I am repeating myself, but we know that Chardonnay and Riesling make great wine, and we also know that Concord and Niagara kind of don't. Right? Yeah. They have a different application in our lives. They're great grapes. They make outstanding jams and juices. They make phenomenal phenomenal out of hand eating. Yeah. Right. They're delicious, but they don't ferment into something that's as spectacular as Chardonnay or Cabernet Sauvignon. Right. And that's okay. That's life as it should be. Right. We just have to sort it all out. That's our job as humans. Sort it all out. Right. Yeah. And we got to do that. We've got to do that same thing with these honey varietals. And we have to be brutally honest with ourselves. Right. Yeah. If we get a honey and we make it into mead, and it's not really exceptional, we just have to admit that, oh, look, we found Niagara. Right? This is Niagara, and it's not spectacular. And I've had really terrific orange blossom honey meads. I've had myself, I like heather, I like leatherwood. There are a number of individual, and I mean, I will say that I don't necessarily love it, but there are wines that I don't love, right, too, that are great wines. Yeah. Right. And I'm not as huge a fan of meadow foam meads as I could be, but they they do make meads that are true to form and that can be really attractive. They've got that, all you can, if you do it right, you can make a mead with metal foam that brings home all of the stuff that really makes it delicious in a cup in front on your table, and put it in a glass as a mead. So there are a number of honeys, and we have to work our way through them.
Yeah.
The mead community doesn't have, the wine community's got just a couple of thousand years worth.
They've done a lot of research already, for sure.
Yeah. So and they're comfortable with what you talked about, right? People in the wine world are comfortable with the fact that the 2020s are different from the 2017s, and in fact that kind of like drives their industry, right? It's something to talk about, it's something to think about, it's something to, and it's also a way to, there are people who think that, in Nebbiolo, right, the 2019s are better than the 2017s, but then there are some people who think the 2017s are actually better. They like that flavor characteristic profile, and that's fine for them, and it's great for the industry that the world wants to have that argument.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Good for everyone, right? You get what you want, we get what we want, and we all have something to talk about, and it's all, and now we can look forward to next year.
Well, the honey side is really interesting. Obviously, there's so many varietals of honey. I wonder. I don't know that this is true. If there are more honeys than grape varietals, I don't know the answer to that question, but it seems like it.
Well, once you get past a couple of thousand,
yeah, that's all just.
you're into the range where it's going to take multiple people doing multiple incarnations and multiple pilot batches of this stuff to work through it all.
Yeah.
And if you've got multiple thousands of years, which we've done with the grapes already,
right,
that's great. And we just as mead makers, if we really get to the point where, a big part of where we are with mead right now is that we are able to make meads that are delicious, right? Because we understand really well what yeast nutrition should be like,
right,
in multiple different ways to get there.
Yeah.
You can have all the arguments that you want about whether it's better to use diammonium phosphate or whether it's better to use Fermate O or Fermate K or what your nutrient plan is. They're all going to end up with slightly different flavor profiles, and none of it's best, right? De gustibus non disputandum, right? In matters of taste, there's no dispute.
Yeah.
I like a combination of diammonium phosphate and Fermate O. That's worked well for us, right? We figured out how to make that work, and how to tinker with it to make each of our meads come out exactly like we want them to come out. Other people are going to have other different approaches. I think our meads come out tasting pretty good. Right?
I would agree.
I'm okay with that. There's lots of other things to play with now to figure out how to make it better, right? Like how to get better fruit.
Yeah.
And we are, right? We are totally addicted to great fruit.
Yeah.
I am. I think a lot of the people that like us are too.
Yeah.
It's like that. But back in the day before those nutrient protocols were worked out, we have to be frank. This is Roger Morse in the books I got right here. See if I can find the quote and read it to you. Because Roger, if somebody calls me the godfather of mead, and somebody did, I'm not really keen to that. It's hard to be the godfather of something that's like 25,000 years old.
It's true.
But if I'm the godfather of mead, Roger Morse is the grandfather of mead, right? Because he was the one who sat down and worked through all these nutrient protocols with a guy named Keith Steinkraus. Both of them worked at Cornell, and prior to their having worked that out, mead wasn't necessarily delicious. The mead wasn't always spectacular. He
Right.
even went so far as to say, it seems far more probable that poor quality of mead was responsible for its decline.
Oh.
Yeast is mentioned in many of the early recipes, but it was added without understanding of its function. The yeast present in ripe honey all belong to the genus Zygomyces, osmophilic yeast that grow only in saturated honey solutions. When honey or any other medium containing yeasts of this genus is diluted to less than 50% sugar, Zygomyces will not grow. What he's saying is we didn't understand how to conduct a clean, effective fermentation, and that as a result, it didn't taste very good.
Yeah.
It wasn't until we figured out that the yeast needs to be healthy and the fermentation needs to occur seamlessly and smoothly from its beginning all the way to the last little bit that we were able to make meads that captured what we're talking about. You know, Carvin makes spectacular orange blossom traditionals, right? And that's really, that hasn't been my game, but my gosh, he's able to use a really clean fermentation and just a tiny little bit of tinkering to get that mead to beautiful. Right. And prior to Roger Morse and Keith Steinkraus, pretty much nobody could do that at all.
Right.
No one knew how we could provide the yeast with the nutrients and the sustenance that it needed to get through a fermentation to 12 or 14% alcohol. That's really hard on yeast cells, and to ask them to run that marathon with no water and no gel packs.
Right.
They got done at the end and they were ugly and throwing up.
Right.
You know?
Well, I love that you're talking about this too, especially because being in the YouTube community, I get a lot of people who want and say that mead should be made like it was in the Viking era, and basically saying the opposite of what you're saying is that, you know, the Vikings drank it, or whomever in the past old days drank it, and it must be good because they continue to, you know what I mean? And so there's a lot of, and I don't want to take it away from people, there's a lot of pride in their families, you know, if you come from that heritage in some regard. You know, I understand some of these things. It's just very interesting because I do think you're right. There's new knowledge, new technology, and people just aren't always ready to accept it.
And the beer world and the wine world have grabbed onto all kinds of sorts of, you know, adaptations in their processes and their breeding of grapes and where they grow things and how they grow things. They're always willing to keep learning how to do it better. Right? I don't want to drive an ox cart. I don't want any, you know.
You don't want to Flintstones it around?
I don't want to sail across the ocean in a Viking boat. I don't want. Vikings were great for Vikings. It's 2024.
Right.
It's 2024. I want the best mead I can make in 2024, knowing what we need to do. And you know what? Those Vikings probably had some just utterly raging hangovers, because when you make meads that are, I mean, realistically, what you're trying to produce when you make a good fermented beverage is pure ethanol, right? Not any of the fusels, not any.
Right.
I mean, maybe just tiny little bits of them for just some flavor components, but you don't want fusels, and you don't want higher alcohols in your stuff. I mean, methanol. You can get methanol out of a fermentation too. You don't want that. No, not at all. You don't want that at all. You want a clean ethanol ferment, you know, no methanol in mine. None.
Yeah.
Right. And I want a clean ethanol fermentation, that works its way to the end, and also doesn't produce a lot of the other off flavors that a struggling yeast cell will produce, because what you're asking it to do is a metabolic process that is intended to produce ethanol, but that can go wrong in lots and lots of different stages. This is a multi-staged process. You take 6-headed sugars and divide it in, you could take a 5-headed sugar and turn it into a 6-headed sugar and divide it in half into 2 3-headed carbon molecules, and then proceed through the fermentation process. But it is many, many steps that all have to occur correctly.
Yeah.
You want them to occur correctly. That's
right.
And we can tweak for that right now by giving the mead. And then, here's the other thing: a lot of people don't think about this, right? I mean, I've used the marathon analogy, right? It is, right?
Yeah.
Once you get to the end of a fermentation, what you're asking the yeast cell to do is it's gonna suck sugars in and then ferment them and then spit alcohol out through a membrane. And that membrane's got to be perfectly healthy in order to do everything that it's being asked to do. You're asking this to do this starting with a lot of sugar and not much alcohol,
Right.
ending up with a lot of alcohol
And not much sugar.
sugar, right? So the task changes, and the amount of abuse that is conducted to that cell wall during the process just keeps getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And don't do that. I mean, that's not you wouldn't ask your dog to do that kind of a task.
Right.
Hey, I want you to do this thing that you're capable of doing, but I'm just going to keep adding more pounds to your back, and I'm going to keep taking away your food.
Right. Right.
No, you wouldn't ask your dog to do that. Don't ask your yeast to do that.
Right. You're making me think of a video I did probably 2 or 3 years ago now, but it was supposed to be a silly kind of bit, and it turned into it. It was punishing yeast for existing, essentially, was the video title. And I threw in the yeast and fermented too hot above their range, didn't give them nutrients. The whole thing was just really kind of over the top, trying to be. But at the end of that fermentation, because I really did purposefully stress them out, it was a noticeably not great product. And that, even in my bit of being silly with it, it was research for me, because I was like, well, here's comparative to things I've done well. And then I went the opposite way. So it's kind of, I'm not saying people to do this, don't go do that. But obviously it's a true thing. You're stressing your yeast out, and it's bad products.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of the lines in the book, which is that and it's a sexist line, so maybe I'll just try to desexify it. A wise person learns from their own mistakes. A smart person learns from their own mistakes. A truly wise person learns from the mistakes of others.
Oh yeah,
and you don't have to make bad mead. You don't have to. You can try it. I mean, I did, right? I made meads that were horrible. My recipe formulation was bad. My nutrient control was terrible. And I made meads that were bad. And people keep asking, do you have any of those early meads? Good God, no.
You're like, they're gone. Yeah.
I mean, and in fact, I let a few of the people who were really big supporters of the meadery taste some of my early meads, and they weren't delicious. And the reason that they weren't delicious is because they weren't built to last, like the ones that we're making right now. Clean fermentations, high acidity, low pH.
Yeah.
All the things we know you can do to make a mead that's going to last 10 years.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about fruit, because we've kind of dipped our toes talking about it for a second and coming back. So we were talking earlier about the concentration of flavors when it comes to some of these fruits. And I'm very curious, when you're designing a recipe, obviously you're doing some trial batches of things. You guys do so many fruited meads with lots of fruit. Obviously you're not just throwing in the same ratios of each fruit into these mixed fruited meads. So what's the recipe development look like for that process when you are figuring that out?
Well, I mean, if you take a look at the Bramble series, right, which is a whole bunch of different fruits,
Yeah.
a bunch of different brambles,
Uh-huh.
right? None of them have more than 10% black raspberry, right? That's it. That's as much as I'm going to put in there,
Right.
right? If we put more than 10% black raspberry, the tannin level and the acidity level is going to be so high that the mead's not going to be drinkable for 2 or 3 years. And people want to buy our meads and drink them.
Right.
I mean, to not have to have some sort of a cellar that you store things in.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can say for sure, we can put some of this is feel, and some of this is a lot of this is piloting. Like we did a lot of piloting with red raspberries to find out exactly how much extraction we could have to produce something that had a delicious red raspberry aroma and flavor, but that didn't extract too much of the acidity and tannin from the pips, because the pips in raspberries will come back to haunt you if you leave stuff on them for too long. So we know a lot now. We've done a lot of piloting. I probably did 20 pilots of the statement before I settled on the recipe that we started piloting. I probably did 10 pilots with different. Well, no, I mean, they did more than that. I say they weren't all with the Ballatons that we use or the Lutovkas that we use for the statement. But I worked with 9 different cherries that I got to pick at the Michigan State University research station.
Well,
yeah, Amy Iazzoni let us come out there and
that's cool.
and to figure out which things were gonna work, and we ended up liking Balaton from what she gave us. Also liked Pozog, also liked Oblashinska, but Balaton was probably the one that we liked the best. We did Meteor and Montmorency and just a few others that are pretty common. North Star. So yeah, I mean we worked through different varieties and then picked a variety, and then we did 9 pilot batches to get to the recipe that we finally released.
Okay.
And then we actually did a 10th batch that was just a repeat of the one. Was it a fluke or could we repeat it? And we could repeat it. But yeah, we've done a tremendous amount of piloting, and I think that's one of the things that has helped us. There have been some batches that we've done that haven't been like massively piloted, right? We did one pilot of Pacific Bramble before it went into a production size batch.
Yeah.
But we also knew from a lot of previous activity that these things are going to work together, right?
Yeah.
This is just going to work, right? Blackberries, red raspberries, and then olali berries. These things are going to work.
Yeah.
So, heck, some of them are consistent parents. Olali berry is one of the parents of Marionberry, for example.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious that there's going to be a significant amount of flavor, complexity, blending. I don't know about overlap, but compatibility is probably the best word I think of for that. Right? There's going to be compatibility. But yeah, we work to find things that have pleasing acidity, fruit, high levels of flavor concentration, and then we work to just pilot until we are, believers.
So you're with the cherry one you're talking about. You said, let's say you had 20.
Right.
Your first 10, were they in tandem? It was 10 and you had all your different cherry varietals and all those things? And then the last 10 were after?
When I went out to the cherry research station and picked all the cherries and did those batches, that was 9 batches at one time. Yeah, and That was back in my home brewing days. It was before we were commercial.
Oh, that's cool.
No, I mean,
It's a lot of
I
work.
guess I'm a little bit of a lunatic.
No, that's cool. I wondered because, like, obviously, with all those different varietals, I'd wondered if it was, you made one and then you changed something and made something else. So it's kind of cool to see that kind of process. It's definitely way more labor intensive to do it that way, but
Okay. Yeah. Seven fermenters, or probably nine fermenters simultaneously. Yeah.
I've been there. I've had my fair share of things like that. So I definitely, you've done way more than me, but I understand the pain.
Yeah. It's not a game. It's not a competition.
So I wanna talk to you about you mentioned homebrew level. You're doing that at the homebrew level, and there are so many people who get to try a Schramm's mead, a fruit bomb, delicious fruit bomb mead, and say, I want to make this. How can people take such a high execution level thing with so much fruit and stuff and do it more so at a homebrew level? Because there are a lot of people who can do it probably at a I'm not saying to cheapen the process, but how can you make it more homebrew available for people? Or how can they make it?
Yeah. I have to say, I have to say that this is one of the big differences between beer and mead. In the world of beer, because home brewing has had such a tremendous history. I mean, we can thank Charlie for that, right? Things are available pretty readily, right?
Yeah.
If you want 40L crystal, if you want 60, 80, 120, what do you want? You can buy it. You can buy it in small quantities. You can buy it in 50-pound sacks, right? You can get what you need. And the same thing is really true with the yeast selections.
Right.
Right now, you can go and, whether you got to order them from whoever, more beer, pick your retailer. You can find what you want to hit the profile that you'd like to do, and you can learn all the stuff that you need to know about. Do they steam their grain before the grist? They make the grist, and how finally do they grind? I mean, all of those things are attainable pieces of information and acquirable ingredients. It's not as easy to do mead. I mean, in some instances, it's hard to come up with the quantities of some honeys that you need to come up with. It's not as easy, for example, if somebody wants to clone our stuff. Well, we're working with a beekeeper who runs lots and lots of hives, right? And he likes us and we love him. And we talk to him and he says, okay, this year's crop is in, and would you like to try some, I'll send you samples of X number of lots. I've pulled this many lots of these things, and you want to sample these lots and order them. And yes, okay, so he sends us 10 jars of honey or 6 jars of honey, and we taste through them, and we like this one and this one, and they're 21 barrel lots, and so we buy 2 lots, and there's 40 barrels coming in, to our facility. That's how we do it, right? And that's something that a home brewer just genuinely can't do.
Right.
You've got to have some scale to be able to do that. And the same thing is true with a lot of the fruits that we buy. Right. It's really, really difficult to come up with loganberries. It's hard for us to come up with loganberries. It's virtually impossible if you don't live in the Willamette Valley in Oregon to come up with loganberries. No one's going to ship you one 30-pound crate in some sort of a freezer container. No, that's not their gig. They're selling it by the pallet, and we're buying it by the pallet, and that works out great, right? So it's not as easy. It's not as easy for a home brewer to do that. That said, it is possible. I mean, this is the thing I've been trying to kind of pitch all along, is find the things that grow where you are that will make great mead, and then figure out how to get the best of them. And this is part of, I mean, for me, this has always been part of the magic of mead. Right, and the magic of mead is that the process is way simpler, right? You're just going to mix the stuff together and ferment it. I say just. That's, you know, anytime somebody says just, it's this is my just speech. When somebody says just, it's either a total revelation, like, why don't we just heat up the milk until all those bacteria die?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or it's somebody that doesn't know what the heck they're talking about. You know,
Right.
Why don't we just move the basement? You know, no, you can't just move the
Yeah.
basement. All right. So on the other hand, you can, in your local area, find there are going to be commercial growers of fruit all over the country. There's somebody within an hour or 2 hours drive of you, pretty much no matter where you live, that's growing fruit. And if they're growing fruit, you can figure out a way to get some of it from them.
Right.
Right. And even in Michigan, right? In Michigan, for example, you can go out to in Traverse City, you can knock on the front door of an orchard after they've done their commercial shakedowns of their trees and say, hey, can I pay you, $1 a pound to go pick the remaining cherries off your tree? Well, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're there for the picking, literally. And you can get great fruit that way. And there are U-Picks that offer just about every fruit you can imagine throughout the Midwest. And the same thing is going to be true in just about every region of the country. There's going to be something that they grow there that's really good, whether it's prickly pears or whatever. And figuring out how to maximize that fruit into a really good mead. If you make that your game, sourcing the best fruits you possibly can and then figuring out the process of turning them into really delicious mead, well, that's kind of the game. That's been the game for us all along.
Yeah. Well, and I love it. I like that you're pointing people towards local things too, because there are so many meads I've gotten to try. It's your stuff, people's thing, Marionberry. You mentioned that a couple times, and that I've had a couple Marionberry meads, and I'm like, this thing is awesome. And then I'm sitting here in the middle of Oklahoma going, well, I'm never going to be able to make this thing. And, there's obviously that's not something I can necessarily fix. I'm sure with money I could make one, but knowing that, like, wow, that person in Seattle can go and make his Marionberry mead like crazy. Well, what can I take around here and make really well too is encouraging.
And I mean, therein, I have to admit, right, that is, it's an advantage that we have. Like, we can make a Marionberry mead. We make a really good Marionberry mead. It's fiercely delicious, and it goes incredibly well with barbecued beef, right? Barbecued brisket.
Yeah.
And we make a Loganberry mead. We make Amelia. We make a mead that's a blend of Loganberries and Tayberries, which is called Briar. We've made a Tayberry mead, and those meads are in the world of mead making. I've frequently said, this is one of the lines, I don't know if it's in the book or not, but I buy the things I cannot make, and I make the things I cannot buy. I can, I can't buy the Heart of Darkness, but I can make it.
Yeah.
And I grow do that. And so, and I Black Agnes, right? And bourbon, the bourbon barrel aged Black Agnes and the gin barrel aged Black Agnes. There aren't, other meads out there that are hitting quite that profile.
Right.
And they're also hard to do. I mean, like, again, there are some places in the country where you can go and pick enough black currants to make a mead like that. But it's also nice, when somebody will make it and you can just go buy a bottle.
Right. Yeah.
That's what our game is, so that you can have that for yourself when you want it, or have that for some really prized guests when you want it.
Yeah.
We're working on other, that's the whole point with the orchard, is that people can't buy a pink champagne currant mead.
Right.
And people aren't, there's other fruits that we're growing out there. We're going to make, for the first time this year, we're going to make a golden raspberry.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know of anybody who's ever made golden raspberry mead. Maybe
I didn't know
maybe
that existed.
somebody probably has on a small
Yeah.
basis, but on a commercial basis, I don't think anyone's released one. And the same thing, like I said, with the gooseberries and whatnot. Those are meads that are going to be instructive. We're going to work like heck to make them really, really delicious. I mean, that is our charge in this process. And I'm asking people to put their trust in us when we do this, because we feel like we have a pretty good track record of doing these things. And if somebody's going to go ahead and make it and if they're bad, we're not going to release them. We'll be honest. But that's the kind of stuff. The other mead that we've had, when you get to apple, now what you're talking about, to make something, I think, that has, like, we just released the Alex Reserve for Alex Kidd. That came out a little bit ago. There are still a few bottles available for people that are willing. And they're somewhat expensive, but we're supporting Alex with this mead. And you can go look him up, and if you don't know about Alex Kidd, please look him up and please check this out. It's a really delicious mead. It came from here when we had a really good variety of selection of apples that we harvested from our trees. Couple of apples that I if you're familiar with them, you will taste them in this mead. If you know what Wixon apples taste like, you will be able to taste the Wixon apples in this mead. And the same thing is true with Jonathan's and Spy Golds and Northern Spies. All of those apples are pretty plainly in that mead, and that's the one thing too that Allison is really good at this, right? Allison is really good at this sorting out of flavors and aromas and the descriptors that are associated with it. She's studying with some really incredible sommeliers and trying to get to pass the next level of her sommelier accreditation. But one of the things we try to do with our meads is to create meads where I don't want to be too sloganeering about this, but we use the term quality and fidelity. And the part of that is that if you taste a Smile of Fortune, you should be able to sit there with the glass in front of you, knowing what the fruits are that are in there, and taste through it, and shut your eyes, put a big dose of the aroma in your nose. Yeah. It's the mead, and you should be able to sort out all those flavors. Right? If we've done our job well. Right? If the fidelity is there. Yeah. If we get good fruit and then we deliver it up to you, you should be able to sit there with the glass, and just like the apple, right? The Alex Reserve, you should be able to sit there with that Alex Reserve, and if you know those apples, you got to close your eyes for a while. You got to really concentrate on what you're tasting. You got to concentrate on the whole process from the early palate through the mid palate through the late palate, and hopefully, if we've done our job well, you can find them all. Yeah. Even if you can't pull them all apart, what you should be able to do is appreciate that. Wow. There's just a ton of apple breadth. Yeah. In this meat, right? Yeah. This isn't just like someone's Honey Crisp or Crispin is one of the ones that they make in a hard cider. Gravenstein is another one like that, right? Those are delicious, and they're wonderful on their own. But the amount of breadth in those meads should be apparent.
I definitely want to. That makes me want to try that. I love apple meads. That's one of my things. I have an apple cinnamon mead that I love to make, and I make it with a couple of varietals, but they're pretty basic, to be honest. So I love getting to investigate into that. And so I had a question about, like, I've got a bunch of questions because you sparked my brain gets to all these little spots. I'm like, I want to dive in these rabbit holes, so I got to choose which one because they're all over the place right now. Speaking of like fruit in general, talking about on a homebrew scale, how do you like? You've been brewing for a long time. You've been through the processes. How do you suggest that people process a lot of these big fruited meads? Are you a big proponent of a fruit press? Are you for people on the homebrew scale? Are you a smash and mash? Like, what do you suggest people do if they are wanting to make these ginormous fruited meads? On our level, it's a simpler, smaller.
Sure. I mean, I can give you a couple of really simple approaches. The mesh bag works just fine. Mm-hmm. Right? If you want to put 25 pounds of fruit into a mash bag and put that in your fermenter, and you're going to need to do punch downs, and you're going to need to make sure that that gets agitated enough so that there's continuous flow. You know, I'm a fan of doing 7 to 9 days worth of punch downs. Mm-hmm. Right? As long as the fermentation is still kicking out CO2 every time you stir it, you can just keep doing punch downs or stirs to make sure that your extraction keeps going.
Yeah.
Right. And if that's the case, then you get done, and you can pull that bag of fruit out and put on a pair of latex gloves. You can go to any restaurant supply store, or heck, you can buy them at the drugstore anymore. Just go get yourself a pair of food safe latex gloves and squeeze that thing until it's almost dry.
Yeah.
And as long as you do that before the fermentation has pretty much exhausted itself, and for us, we used kind of like 28 days as the outside limit of how long we're going to leave, how much extraction we're going to permit. But as long as you do that before then, there'll be enough fermentation that's still going to occur to consume any oxygen that you might introduce in this process. And you can get as, you have to be patient. If you're thinking you're going to be done with this process of squeezing out a bag of fruit in minutes, no, you're not. If you're going to try and get all the fruit, if you're going to use a 7.9 gallon fermentation bucket and try and get 5 gallons of fruit meat out of that, it's going to take you a while. Right. And be prepared to wear out your forearms and take the 20 minutes it's going to take to get all that juice out of there. And then when you get done, that fruit goes in the compost heap, and you got your stuff. I mean, there are other approaches that you can take. We have depending on where, you can use a stainless steel mesh strainer, a big stainless steel mesh strainer that you can get from a restaurant supply store. And literally pour the fruit through there and press it out.
Yeah,
those are two methods that I would recommend that are completely viable. And I mean the method that we used to use, there was a thing called a siphon tap, and that was a really cool little device, but they're not being made anymore, and ours is worn out, so we've had to adapt.
Yeah.
That's what
so is that what do you guys do? I don't think I got to ask this question to Allison or James, but when you are processing a ton of fruit in a thing, how do you? Because I say this with experience. Yesterday, I'm making my first true, I'll say wine, where I bought wine grapes and had them mashed up, and and I was pressing these wine grapes, and it's only like 5 pounds or whatever, 10 gallons, whatever it is. How do you process 2,000 pounds? That's crazy.
Sure. Well, I mean, we have heavy duty pumps, and we have a pump called the Vermont Flexi pump that is meant to pump high viscosity liquids.
Okay.
It's what we use to pump our honey. It's also what we use to pump out when we come out from underneath a fruit cap. So the tank has ports on it towards the bottom of the tank, and you can connect the hose to the pump, and from the pump you can connect to another device called a pump over cart. Pump over cart is a cart that has a 2-inch fitting with an elbow that you can buy, and you run the fruit saturated liquid from the fermentation in through this 2-inch chunk of stainless steel, and then into this elbow. And on the bottom of the elbow, you put a mesh bag. The pump over cart has a false bottom to it, and it's a mesh insert that fits into the cart. It's about 8 or 10 inches deep. And if you have a way to drop a picture into this, we could potentially send you one. And then the mesh bag sits on this false bottom, and you pump the meat into the mesh bag, and the meat falls through the mesh bag and through this mesh grate into the bottom of the cart, and you pump out of the bottom of the cart, and away it goes.
Interesting.
You're going to end up with a bunch of fruit solids, and if in our instance, the secondary, there's a substantial amount of mead loss from the fruit solids in the secondary, but we use a racking arm to determine where in the tank there is clear liquid, and we siphon out from above that fruit pack at the bottom, and then goes into tertiary and sits there until it's clear, and we can bottle it.
Well,
if it's being really obstinate in secondary, we can use some fining, which we do on occasion. We never filter.
Yeah. It's just so, my brain, I envision all of these things, and then I look at my little bit I've done with the amount of fruit I've done, and it's super cool to think about it, and kind of inspiring to want to do more large. If y'all are doing this, surely I can buy 30 pounds of blueberries, and I can do this. I can push my boundaries a little bit. So I say this because a lot of home brewers try your stuff and are super inspired to do it. And I'm hoping that as you're getting to explain these things, that they feel encouraged to try these big fruited meads, and don't be afraid to invest the money or go, locally and pick the fruit. Use your resources and try these things, because y'all make some great mead. And I'm not saying that people need to not buy your stuff, because they need to go buy it. It's also just fun to try and make it. The Heart of Darkness is one of those that I will never be able to make because I don't have the fruit. I'll be honest with you. Right. But if I had the fruit, I'd be trying to make that thing too, because it's so good.
Taking a shot at it is really fun. And, the Pliny's and the Two-Hearted Ales, people have been trying to master those for a long time, but I still think they're still selling plenty of Pliny and Two-Hearted.
Yeah. There's nothing like the original, that's for sure. So one of my questions I had for you was, what is it feels like a weird question, but one of your favorite meads to make? Like, when you are going through the process, do you have one that you're like, I love making this one? Or is it all the same at this point?
No. I love making the Statement Reserve.
What's it about it that you like making, or why you like making it?
There are many reasons that I love making the Statement Reserve. My great grandfather and my great aunt Helen and my dad all worked on a cherry farm up in Traverse City. Aunt Helen owned a cherry farm on the Mission Peninsula in a place that would be worth, if my family still had the property that she owned, it would be worth millions and millions of dollars right now. But cherry farming is in my family's blood. My great grandpa did it, my grandpa did it, my dad did it, all with Aunt Helen. So I feel connected to my family when I grow cherries.
That's cool. Huh.
Char-baked cherries are the most delicious cherries. After having made cherry mead with all of those varieties that I got from the Michigan State University Extension Center, Char-baked blew them all away without even, didn't even look in the rearview mirror. It was just
yeah. Yeah.
They're just so good. And there is, this year we made a mead with honey that James produced in our own beehives and cherries that we grew on our own trees. I mean, that's kind of that's putting mead where it's supposed to be.
Right.
The best wines in the world come from. I mean, if Domaine Romani Conti in Burgundy is one of the top producers, they grow their own grapes and they turn them into their own wine.
Mm-hmm.
And to make your own honey and to make your own fruit and to turn it into something that's delicious. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, Heart of Darkness is really, really good. I love the Heart of Darkness.
Mm-hmm.
There is a purity and a clarity in the Statement Reserve that is, it's wonderful, and it also allows us the opportunity to do the things that you're supposed to do to make the best thing that you can do. I mean,
right.
I pick when that fruit is picked. I choose the day. I go out and I taste that fruit and I measure it with a refractometer, and I look at it and I judge it, and I understand whether or not the Japanese beetles are getting designs on things, and I know, okay, today is the day, right? And been doing that now since the late 90s, and accumulated knowledge is a really cool thing.
Yeah. It is. I really wish. I'm like sitting here going, man, it'd be so cool to have your own honey here and then have your own fruit. Unfortunately, I don't have a green thumb. I'm gonna have to learn mine. Mine was not born into me in any way. So if I get a green thumb, it's gonna be a learned thumb for sure. But
okay, but there's great books. There's great books by Stella Otto's Backyard Orchardist, and you can do a great job. I mean, it's in a book, Reading Rainbow.
Yeah. Well, I've loved getting to try your stuff over the years too. I saw you at Macer Cup last year. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. The kind of award ceremony and stuff like that, and I got to try. I think it was the Sunflower was the release then. Was that
Sunflowers?
Yeah. And that was so fascinating too. One thing that's so cool, and I don't want to keep you forever. I know you have things to do tonight, so I'm gonna wrap us up. But I have really loved embracing and tasting the balance you have between sweetness and acidity and just the overall balance in general in your meads. It is fascinating. If you look at the numbers sometimes of final gravities, it can be staggering to especially like the Sunflowers, if I remember, was pretty sweet, or pretty number sweet, you know what I mean? But you had balanced it so well, and so it's just so cool to see that that's achievable.
Well, we picked a lot. I mean, I won't. There are some people that love things that are sweet, just kind of off the charts sweet.
Right.
And that's what Sunflowers is for. To some extent, that's what Nutmeg is for as well. Yeah. Right. Nutmeg is not a mead that is based on our traditional blend of of a spike of acidity on the finish and and a commensurate amount of sweetness. And Sunflowers is the same way. I mean, Sunflowers is for those people that really think sweet's their game.
Yeah,
it is, and more power to those people. Once again, de gustibus non est disputandum. But someone's going to like almost everything as long as it's clean, as long as it's well fermented, and you started with good ingredients. Mm-hmm. And certainly Sunflowers started with some spectacular honeys.
Yeah.
They're all pretty well reflected still.
Yeah.
We probably went a little further than we should have with the sweetness on that mead, but then again, it's tasty.
Yeah, people still, and that's like you said, people will drink it, especially anything from you guys. I think people are going to try. So I have one last thing, and I'm curious if you were to give, after all your years of homebrewing now commercial brewing, what advice would you give to people who are maybe just starting? Is there something that was a life-changing little tidbit of information you heard, or brew changing rather, anything like that you would encourage people with before we go?
Well, I mean, there wasn't, honestly, there wasn't one thing. There was no nutrient helped, in buying better ingredients helped, buying better honey, growing my own fruit. But patience. I am going to quote myself again from the book, but life is one long, slow encroachment on ignorance. And the one thing I would say is have the patience and allow yourself to learn. Right? Allow yourself the privilege, the leeway to figure out that this isn't quite exactly what I wanted to do, and the thing I need to change to get closer to that is this, and then to do it. Right? Yeah. That's it, the impatience to say, oh, I have to make a perfect mead the first time out of the gate. You don't tie perfect flies the first time out of the gate. Nobody learned to play the violin on their first try, right? There's so much in life that's the result of figuring out what you're working with and learning to really manipulate it into what you want it to be. Give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to fail. Give yourself permission to learn. And then the other thing is figure out what it is that you actually want. I mean, if you want to make a Schramm's mead, if you've tasted a Schramm's mead and you want to make a Schramm's mead, you know, I can help you learn a bit about that. But if that's not what you want, if what you want is something that's drier or sparkling or has a different set of flavor profiles, or is it, you know, we don't do soft, subtle traditionals.
Yeah,
which can be delicious meads.
Yeah,
if that's what you want to do, figure out clearly in your, you know, I call it your mind's palate, your mind's nose, your mind's palate. Figure out what it is that you want to do, and then just give yourself the permission to get there in the however many steps it takes, and trust yourself and learn from yourself.
Yeah.
That's how you get to what you really want.
I love that. It is a journey. I feel like I feel that on like a very deep level. I've done, I don't know what my number is, 350 something at this point, different things. And a bunch of them have been good and a bunch of them have not been great. But this whole journey has been really fun, and I feel like I'm barely out of the driveway. Yeah, I'm like turning the corner.
Mead is in its infancy.
Yeah,
it's the oldest beverage. I'm still convinced it is the oldest fermented beverage, or at least honey was in the oldest fermented beverage.
Right.
But what we don't know is so vastly greater than what we do.
Right.
I wish I could live to be 3,000 because me and Mel Brooks, right? 1,000-year-old man.
Oh, well, Ken, thank you so much for your time tonight. I feel like I've held you way over than what I promised you, but thank you for not only investing in the mead community at large and everything you've done, but just being willing to share. I know it's sometimes tough whenever you've spent years and years, but you're such an open book, and I love that you're willing to talk about things and share. And it's not necessarily everything's all a trade secret. It can be. It's okay to hold things back, but us mead makers, we want to support you, and we want to keep buying your mead. So I don't think I need to keep pushing Schramm's mead because most people know this, but I will put links, all the links I can discover down below to support Schramm's. And I if you want to talk to them, obviously they are very willing to talk. I'm really getting to enjoy knowing you guys more and more through this process. So thank you for being willing to sit down and chat.
Well, I mean, we would love if people would go ahead and buy a Schramm's meat. There's a lot of stuff we want to do. There's a lot of stuff we still want to do that's going to help the entire mead community.
Yeah.
And we do need money to do it. And the only way we get money is if people buy Schramm's mead.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff too. Allison's talked about Mead Institute. Like, you guys are doing so much behind the scenes, so it's so cool to see everything you're doing. And I am in 100% support of everything that's happening there. So thanks for your time. I'll be putting so many links below. Please buy some Schramm's mead because you will not regret it. I promise you that. I have personal witness. I testify to that. You will not regret it. So thanks, Ken.
It's been my pleasure.